Welcome back to the Aro Benaiah Show, where we shine light on the stories of entrepreneurs, tradespeople, and innovators who build industry with their hands, grit, and vision. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Ackerman, a two-time startup founder, Vector Capital professor, and new author of Entrepreneur Odyssey, a book he described as the lean startup meet the alchemist. He has built a company, invested in more than 70 startups, run accelerator, and mentor hundreds of founders. Andrew brings candor, humor, and hard end lessons that make the chaotic world of entrepreneurship both practical and inspiring. Once again, it's a pleasure having you on the show, Andrew.
Thanks for having me on my show. I think you are the first Nigerian podcast I've been on.
Wow,
I've been on
amazing.
I've been on presentations with other groups in Nigeria, but the first podcast. So, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks for showing up. I really appreciate it. So, Andrew, what was it like growing up for you?
What was which part like for me? The being on the podcast we just started.
Yeah, I would just like you to give me like a preview of how you grow because I notice over time a whole lot of entrepreneurs while growing up, sometimes they have a little bit of traits that speak
Oh,
volumes
so
to,
in my personal past,
yeah.
it's funny you should mention that. When I look for things in entrepreneurs that I'm going to invest in, I actually I don't find all of those in mine. So I actually, my entrepreneurial influence was my grandfather. He coming out of World War II and he moved to the States. He did everything from, manufacturing those Zippo lighters, remember flip the old
Yeah.
stuff, all the way up to doing insurance products. But he died when I was 12 and a half. So, I didn't really get the benefits of having him as a mentor when I got to college and beyond. My dad was a doctor, which is kind of like, in many ways, sort of an anti-entrepreneur. It's like everyone whose parents was a businessman, they hustled their whole life. They wanted their kids to be a professional,
Yeah.
like a doctor, an accountant, a
Yeah.
lawyer,
That lawyer.
something stable. So it kind of skipped a generation with me.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. So, what kind of job do you actually do before you founded your first company?
Sure, sure. So, I like to joke that my professional career only makes sense in retrospect. Like in the middle of like zigging and zagging, and
Yeah.
what the hell is he thinking? So when I finished business school, it was like it was the 90s. Like, I'm old, I guess, right? So I finished business school in the 90s, and this was mid 90s. This was before like the internet was really a thing. Like I remember I'm in school, I'm looking at a computer and I see Netscape. Remember Netscape? Heard of Netscape?
Yeah, I heard
They would
about it.
do all the browsers. And I remember thinking, wow, if there's ever anything here other than like government data sources, this could be really big. But by the time I'm graduating, the whole startup hustle, the whole startup culture didn't really exist. There were a couple of people doing VC, but it was really a small industry. In fact, the one guy that went to business school with me that did venture capital, like nobody knew what Ben did. Of course, the irony is that now Ben and I are really tight because we do the same thing, but like back then, no one really knew about these things. So I ended up going into consulting. So like, large company, it was called Booz Allen and Hamilton. Worked with like Fortune 100 companies, like big oil and gas companies. By the way, they did ask me if I would do an oil and gas project in Nigeria back in the 90s.
Whoa.
So I said, that's kind of interesting. Tell me about it. And then they started talking about the armed compound I would live in. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pass on that one. Uh, so there's oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, financial services, but big, big, big companies, which was okay. It was interesting. But after a while, I'm like, I'm kind of tired of saying everyone needs to move right. And then like months later, should I move somewhere? Uh, and about that time in the late 90s, I was on a project in London for BP Amoco. They were acquired, so British Petroleum was buying Amoco. And when you look at a potential acquisition, the two groups that are in charge of like coming up with what the combined company would look at, they get to see the other company's books. So if the merger doesn't go through, they can't go back to their old jobs. They're contaminated. So it's kind of a hard role to staff for. It's kind of risky. So our project was using this new interwebs thing to have everyone submit their numbers kind of separately, and then we would combine it automatically. So like we'd upload the numbers, we'd hit like process, we'd go out for dinner, come back a half hour later, and boom, pro forma financials for the entire, combined company. It was pretty cool. And then I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. It didn't exist when I came out of business school, but now I know. So I moved back to New York. I got involved in my first startup, a company called Bunk One. They helped summer camps. So the idea, like, you send your kid away for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. You know, we'll see you in the middle of the summer on visiting day. Go play sports, go camping. We help those summer camps to take their photos of kids, keep them in touch with parents when they didn't want the kids to be anywhere near a computer. That was my first startup.
Wow.
Did that for 8 years. Did a couple of other things. Eventually ended up investing in startups, and then ended up doing what I do today.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Thanks for sharing. And when you started your first company, what was the leap like? More like the leap, how was it like?
Um, so it's really interesting. A lot of things in my life, some things I did purposefully and some things I just got lucky with. So I'd been looking to make a change for a while. I had purposefully left consulting and started working for a company called Kaplan Test Prep. It's like when you take, the SATs or a TOEFL or the GMATs to get into business school. They
Yeah,
help you study for those things, and they were trying to get into this internet space. Like everything they were doing was either in person or, here's a CD-ROM. So they wanted to know what an interactive web product would look like. So I was helping them build it. I did that on purpose because I wanted to get away from consulting
yeah.
into something more web related. But then I was kind of trying to figure out, like, how do I get into a real startup at this point? And it was just by chance that a friend of mine who I went to business school, his brother was starting this company, Bunk One. And he said, like, what do you think about this? Do they have any chances? And I'm like, okay, most of the stuff we were seeing then was like, just like, I don't know why people put money in it. It's just stupid. And this one actually didn't seem so stupid. So I said, tell David I wish him the best of luck. I think this one has a shot. And Eric said, you can tell him yourself they need a third founder to be the COO. That's how I
Wow.
got into it.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. So, what were some of the biggest lessons or gut punch that took you away from those early founders years?
Um, as an early starter, a founder, you got to say yes, right? If somebody's willing to pay you for your service, say yes and figure it out later. I mean, assuming you can do it. So I learned this one the hard way. I'd come from this consulting world, so it's like, why do we have 13 different pricing plans? Can't we just consolidate it down to three? It'll make things easier. It was a point of friction between me and some of the salespeople for a while. And the CEO took me aside and said, listen, you don't get it. Like, we just need to say yes at this. We need to get revenues. We need to get customers that we can refer to. So other customers, when they ask us who you're working with, we can say these guys. It's going to be messy. It's okay to be messy. We'll straighten it out and we'll like simplify it in a year or two. But for now, we just got to say yes.
Wow.
That was, my first kind of, oh, this is different from what I did before. It's not just a much smaller company. It's like fundamentally different to be at a startup. The other thing is speed, right? There are things that you could go and take a couple of weeks or a couple of months to do at a large company, and you want to do it at like a deep level of, you made sure that like anything anyone could ever say, like, did you do this? Do you do that? You got that base covered. You don't do that with a startup. With a startup, the only people you need to convince are yourself and maybe your co-founder too,
Yeah.
right? So you can say to yourself, that's enough work. I don't need to do this other stuff. We know it's directionally correct. Let's just do it already. So the level of like speed versus thoroughness at a startup is very different than it would be when you're working at a large corporation and everything needs to be very kind of buttoned up.
Wow, wow. Amazing. Amazing. I think it's the fact that you just saying yes and pulling out what you have from the other place and putting it into this particular one it really speak volume too. It's risky, but you have to put it your all and actually more like be willing to work on it. And yeah, amazing. So
So I'll give you an example from the book if you want, because it's actually kind of cool.
yeah,
Aro, did you ever build an app?
no, I haven't. I run a cleaning business.
Oh, okay. So Um, this example works better if you're building an app or a website.
Yeah.
But like first time founders, when they build an app, usually what they do is they have this idea in their head and they just start coding. Right? Like I'm going to build it. And then they build, oh, I want this feature, I want that feature. And they spend a lot of time building it. And then they go out into the world and they find out that like, maybe users didn't care at all. Or maybe they only cared about like this, like 25% of what they built. All this other stuff didn't really matter to them. But they didn't know that because they didn't get out into the world. So, one of the examples I give in the book is something called an index card website or an index card app. So instead of going building all that, just take an index card, maybe slightly bigger than this, and sketch on it what the screen of the app is going to look like. And do that for all the pages or all the screens of the app, even down to like the buttons that the person's supposed to click. And then when you're having this conversation with him, and the guy, I should actually back up. Like the book is written like a novel. It's a novel about a guy trying to create a startup. So his mentor in the book suggests that he do this. He sits down with a customer in one of the chapters of the book, and he goes to her and he says, "Listen, thinking about building this app. I don't, you can't hurt my feelings here. I just want your honest feedback. I want to know what works, what doesn't work. If it's something that doesn't work and you tell me it doesn't work, you're saving me years of my life. So please be honest. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you these index cards. Each index card is like a screen of the site or the app. I want you just to interact with it the way you would if it was really your phone. If you want to click a button, push the button with your finger. You can't ask me questions. I'm not going to be there if you downloaded the app, but I will ask you to do one thing. I will ask you to verbalize what you're thinking. So if you're thinking, this is kind of confusing, just say that out loud. If you're thinking, I want to hit this button, but I'm worried about what's going to happen to my data, whatever it is, just say that out loud because I can't read your mind. But I'm going to sit here quietly and watch you as if you're using the app. And then whenever the person clicks, you give them the next card. Oh, they clicked this button, give them the other card. And that way you can see how they actually would interact with it in the real world. You can see, like, I do this with 30 people. Nobody seems to click these other buttons. I guess I don't have to build it. Or, afterwards when we come out and break characters, like, hey, I noticed you didn't click on this. Why not? And then they'll tell you, like, I didn't know what that did. Right, okay, you can fix the UI. Or, it didn't seem that important to me. Okay, so don't build it. So for the cost of a pack of index cards, a couple of bucks, you can save yourself months worth of work.
Wow, amazing, amazing. The fact that it give you more like this idea of what could actually happen at the end of the day, and the fact that you can test run it without running because building an app is very expensive, right? Trying out this
Yeah.
particular aspect just save you tons of money, man, tons of wasted of effort at the end of the day if it doesn't work well in respect of the UI design and everything.
Yeah, and I did it the wrong way with my first startup. We spent tens of thousands of dollars to build this multi-brand store for like the clothing and stuff you would buy for your kid before camp. And then what we didn't realize is none of the parents got involved with the website until the kids were already on the bus to camp, and it's too
Oh,
late to go shopping for them. But had we done like a simple test, we could have saved ourselves all that pain and suffering and money.
yeah, so true. Thank you. Um, you have actually, how did you invest in Celtic startup? Change your perspective on what business that succeed and fail.
Sure, sure. So, my first startup that I invested in was a startup a friend of mine from business school brought to me. He had started an angel group. So, for those of your listeners who don't know what angels are, they're like, venture capitalists, like they're a VC fund that invests in early stage startups, only instead of being a fund that invests other people's money, they're just investing out of their own pocket. And they tend to be earlier. So, like, if a VC fund wants to wait until you've made your first sale, an angel might invest before that. So they take more risk. They get, hopefully, more return.
Awesome.
So not Ari, Ira was starting an angel group, and he had this one startup which was really cool. It was a pharmaceutical that was supposed to help with Alzheimer's, like detect if someone had Alzheimer's or not. I didn't know anything about pharmaceuticals. I didn't know anything about that drug. I probably should not have touched that deal. because like I didn't know them so much, but I trusted Ira, and everything outside of like, does it work or not, seemed to make sense. So I put a little money in, and it did well, right? It actually hit. So, it's like going to Vegas, putting money on the roulette wheel, and then you win. Like, even though it's like zero skill on your part, now you're hooked. Now you're a gambler.
Yeah.
I started doing a couple more angel investments. I must have done like 4 or 5 angel investments on my own while doing my startups. And then finally, I got introduced to a company called Dream It Ventures, which was a VC fund slash accelerator.
Mm.
And they were looking for someone to take over the New York office. And by chance, I knew the guy that was running the New York office already. So I picked up the phone. I said, "Hey, Mark, is this good or bad?" And he's like, "This is awesome. I need someone else to do, all these other things. I have a separate job." So I ended up taking over that. And we made 24 investments over 2 years in early stage, pre-revenue startups, all different industries. So that was the first part of my time at Dream It. So I had like, 5 angel investments, then 24 generalists really early. Then we had the opportunity to spin up an ed tech program. So it's an accelerator just for startups that were selling to schools or university. So they asked me if I could, build that program, if I could make it a little later stage, if I could make it something that was a little more mature. So we did that. I did 17 investments there. And then we had an opportunity to invest in startups that are in the real estate or construction space. And that was a huge opportunity. And they looked around the room again and they're like, "Oh, everyone else is busy. Can you build this one for us too?" So then I built that program and I did 31 investments in those types of startups. And I left there in 2021 and I've done 7 direct investments through SPVs, special purpose vehicles. So basically like a mini fund just for one investment so that I and somebody else can invest. And that's how I get to over 70. You do that on.
Wow. That was pretty amazing. Being that you have a whole lot of projects to jungle between and it. Yeah, I guess it
Yeah.
will have been fun running those between days and days and seeing the various interaction from one project to the other, from another project to the other. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. So you have run accelerator, I'm seeing hundreds of founder. What common mistake do you see new entrepreneur make again and again?
So the common mistake, number one mistake is related to what we were talking before with the index card app.
Yeah.
It's doing stuff without asking yourself, how can I test this quickly and cheaply? Right. So, testing your app, okay, you do with index cards. Okay, now that makes sense. But I'll give you another example. This is a true example. It's a company that went through my program. They were a company from Costa Rica, and they were looking to build a critical what they were building, but they had a freemium model. So it was a free version, and then there was, if you pay extra money, you can get the better features and the more features. So, uh, they were kind of concerned that they didn't have a merchant account, so they couldn't take credit cards. So how were they going to test what percentage of the people they could get to upgrade? And they didn't want to show up at demo day and not have anything. So what they decided to do is they just built it. They said, "Okay, put your credit card in here." Went nowhere. You hit submit. They didn't get the credit card. A message popped up, said, "Hey, Aro, congratulations. We're so happy you're one of our early users. You get 2 months free." Now, what was good about this was you didn't know that you weren't paying until after you hit pay. So the data they got, the percentage of people who actually signed up thinking they were paying, that's valid data. They could plug that into their model and they moved something from an assumption or a guess to proven. And they did that with less than a week worth of coding. I mean, I think it was probably about an hour of coding to just let somebody type in the credit card and then ignore it. So that then when they went to raise, they could say, "Yeah, as soon as we get that merchant account up and running, this is what we expect." So that's the mentality. The number one mentality, especially if it's a first time founder, is not thinking, "Wait, before I do this, how can I test it cheaply or for free?" So that's number one. And related to that is people end up doing the stuff that they're comfortable with rather than what to do. So you want to hear a joke?
No, but
I'll tell you.
yeah, tell you a joke. I could really appreciate.
This is a joke I use with founders when they start to do stuff that's like in that category. So there's this old man, and he's looking down in the middle of the street at night, just like this, looking. His friend comes up, sees him there in the middle of the street, looking down, and says, "What are you doing in the middle of the street?" He goes, "Oh, I lost $20. I'm looking for it." So, okay, let me help you look. So he starts looking, and like it's the middle of the street. There's not a lot of places for $20 to be hiding. So after about a minute or two, he's like, "I don't see it. Where exactly did you lose it?" And he goes, "Down that alley." So his friend says, "Well, if you lost it down that alley, what are we doing in the middle of the street? You know, the light's better here." So, I tell that joke and they kind of laugh, and I'm like, I say, "Aro, you're building features because you're a programmer. That's where you're comfortable. That's where the light's better
Yeah,
for you. But really, what's going to make and break your business right now is, what's your conversion ratio? What's your cost per click? That stuff that maybe you're not as comfortable with. The light's not as good for you. It's kind of scary. It's a dark alley. That's where you got to go. That's where the money is for you right now." So that's the kind of second or the related issue, for founders. They tend to do the stuff that they're more comfortable with rather than taking a step back and saying, what do I really have to do now?
yeah, amazing. Thanks for that particular analogy. It just speaks volume to building something, being a founder, coding, the fact that you know how to do a particular, the practical aspect of it in building it up does not mean you understood the customer so well in a way that it resonates with them and everything. So you have to think from their whole end how the project is going to kind of help them and what's because every more like every project, the customer will look at it from the particular end. What is the gain for me? And from the story you make reference of it that yes, giving them a free version actually speak volume, being that they were able to test run it before you even make reference of payment. So
Yeah.
you often say VC are hypocrites. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, you've heard my rant already. Okay, let's say you have a startup and you're asking me for money. Like, I'm happy to give you money, but there's certain things that I want first. I want you to be able to tell me that your startup is like twice as good as anything else out there. I don't want like a small improvement. I want it to be like quantum level to jump. And also, I want you to be able to tell me clearly and concisely, 8, 10, 15 seconds, why you're special and better. Like, that's what the standard I'm holding you to. But then when I, as a VC, turn around and try to get people to invest in my fund, I tell my investors, hey, we're two exited founders. We made a lot of money for our investors. We know what it takes to build a business. We've got lots of connections in our space. When a founder comes to us, we can help introduce them to customers. We help introduce them to partners. We help them introduce to the VCs that'll invest after us. And that's exactly what every other VC fund says. Right? It's the exact same thing, just a different logo and different headshots. So we don't hold ourselves as VCs to the same standards we insist on in the
Hmm.
startups that ask us for money. So part of the reason, like the reason I like an accelerator model where you actually work with the startups for a bunch of months before you invested is it was uniquely different. It was like, no, we're not just a fund, we're working with you helping polish that product for a bunch of months. So it was unique, it was different, but there are a lot of accelerators out there. So now, what I do in my own investing or the funds that I'm looking to maybe create are ones that have their own unique advantages to them that no one else is doing. Because
Wow.
I don't want to be a VC hypocrite.
I mean, in the fact that I think your story just depicts the fact that VC does not measure themselves with the same standard they used to measure the other side. And
No,
that
they
really makes
don't.
them an hypocrite.
And like some of us are like just totally ignorant to it. It's like, well, it's different. Well,
Yeah.
it's not different.
Okay. For founders listening, what is the right way to approach investors so they can actually stand out of the noise?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. Um, the number one way not to approach investors is to spray and pray. You don't get a list and just email out, dear investor. So it's actually kind of funny. So One of the things that I wanted to make sure I was able to do for the book was I didn't want it to be like the mentor and the founder just kind of sitting at a conference room table talking the entire time. So I needed to put these lessons in other contexts. So I actually have the scene in the book where they talk about this is actually the founder having a drink with one of his buddies, and his buddy is talking about his buddy is single. He's talking about his dating life, and he's talking about how he finally bit the bullet and he got a matchmaker, like a human matchmaker to help him find somebody. So the founder's like, well, how does that work? How's that working for you? It's like at first I thought it was really good because I had someone who was sitting down, understanding what I really wanted. But then over time, like the intros they were making, not really that great. And then it occurred to me the problem was there's no filter there. Like they're incentivized to, any client that comes in and gives them, $5,000 to be a customer, they'll take. So anyone that they're introducing me to, they didn't turn anyone away because they were weird or not matchable. As long as the check cleared, they would take them. So, and at that point in the book, the analogy that kind of jumps into the founder's head, what jumps in is like, that's what was bothering him about a company that was offering to help them raise money. He was like, I wanted to, I want to raise money for my startup. These guys come in and say, hey, we'll raise it for you if you give us, 5% of what we raise. And it seems like a great deal. But then you realize from the VC's perspective, there's no filter there. The companies that act as those intermediaries, any company that's willing to sign, they'll take. So it usually means nothing. In fact, it's sometimes negative because it may be the founders who either can't raise money on their own or don't see how valuable it is to form that relationship that think they can outsource something like that. So it's actually a negative signal. And I'll even go even further. This part doesn't get into the book because I thought about this afterwards. So this is special only for your listeners.
Oh,
You
thank
ready?
you. Yes.
Okay. So let's pretend you have a startup, not a consumer app, like I just talked about before. Now let's say you have software that you sell to large companies. And let's say it's an enterprise sale. Let's say they pay $50,000 a year for your software. Not uncommon for, a business to business software based startup in the States. I've got somewhere it's a $200,000 per year contract. Um, Before you as a founder would approach a potential customer, you would do a lot of research,
Yeah.
right? You look up the company online, know everything about the company. You would go deep into the company to figure out who the right person in the company is to talk to. And then you would find out everything about her, him, whoever it was. And then when you reached out to them, you'd probably get a warm intro if you could. But if you couldn't, you would write a really tight email. And in the first sentence or two, it would just jump out. Hey, Aro, I know you've been at company ABC for 5 years. I know you and the company have been working or struggling even to do this. My software is the solution to your problem. What that does right away tells you like, oh, he's actually put a lot of thought
Hmm.
into this. Maybe I should listen. So the interesting thing is the same founder who does all that when they're doing sales, when they go to a VC and they're asking for 10 times as much money or 100 times as much money, they'll send out an email like, you're an investor. We do XYZ. Here's our deck. Tell me what you think. Without doing any research to figure out that, like, you're pitching me an ad tech startup. I don't do ad tech. I do construction and real estate related. Why are you emailing me? And why is that okay, right? It shouldn't be. Raising money from an investor is like sales. You're selling a piece of your company.
Hmm.
You should approach it with the same high touch that you do enterprise. And if anyone in your audience is like, oh God, I did that. I'm a horrible human being. Don't worry. We didn't read your email, right? We get emails. Those emails just get deleted right away. Just pretend it never happened and do it right the next time.
Wow, wow. Amazing, amazing. Thanks for this particular line. I think it's very, very key that doing your background research is very key. Not just about what you do, but about what the investor, what they actually more like, what they like to invest in, the nature of things they like to invest in, and
Mhm.
what they have been investing the corpus of time. I think that will give you an idea of who is ideal to actually invest in the company. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
So you have
actually,
been.
let me hold on, let me
Okay.
build on that, right? Because you raise a very good point. Um, the number one skill as a founder you should have, I mean, everything else I've told you is tactics. But if you want to talk about what what personal characteristics you should work on, it's actually empathy, right? Which seems kind of soft and fluffy, I know, but let me explain. When you're trying to sell something or try to get an investor to take part of your company, you need to understand what they're thinking. You have to put yourself in their
Yeah.
shoes. So to be able to say, okay, here's the investor. What's his day like? Well, he probably gets spam from 400 companies that haven't done any research. Then he's got to go track down his portfolio companies and figure out how they're doing. Then he's got like three companies he really does want to talk to that he scheduled time with that he needs to be able to focus for and then capture and make a decision. Does he want to put more time in or is he going to pass? Okay, I understand what this guy's going through now. Now that I put myself in his shoes, how would he or she want to be approached? What would be effective? Right? And you may not know, but you can ask around. And then when someone says, "Oh, you should get a warm intro to a VC," you're like, "Oh yeah, I see how that would help." Right? He's time starved. If someone says, "Hey, Andrew, Aro's a sharp guy. He's working on something that is actually in your sector. You should take a look at it." That email goes to the top of the pile. Okay. I thought about what's, the shoes Andrew's in. I think that makes sense. So that kind of empathy, whether it's a VC, a customer, your co-founder, the employees you want to bring on later, like anyone that touches your business, the ability to put yourself on their side of the table and kind of pretend you're them for a moment to see what'll work and what won't work, that's the biggest kind of personal trait you should work on.
Wow, wow, amazing. I think that almost falls down to the next question I tend to ask. You have been on both sides as founder and investor. How do you balance empathy with tough love when mentoring startup?
Yeah, so I usually start by telling people that I'm a dick. They don't believe me. They think I'm joking, but I kind of am. And then whatever bad advice I give, I smile. And the worse the advice is, the more I smile. And then I usually end it on something like, "Listen, nothing would make me happier than for you to prove me wrong, but this is how I see it." So,
Hmm.
for example, a company might come to me and they might be doing something that I've seen in the market a lot already, and they're late. Let's say, "Hey, Aro, listen, I gotta tell you, like, one of the things I look for is why now, right? What changed recently that makes this possible?" And the thing that you're talking about, that why now, was already 4 years ago. Like you're doing something that was triggered, like COVID made remote work,
Yeah.
more common. You're coming up with a solution to that. You're a little late to that party, right? That was 2020, 2021. Bunch of startups came up after that. Before you go any further, before you build anything else, just don't just do something. Stand there for a moment and pretend you are your customer, empathy, and you're looking for a solution and just Google around. See what comes up. I bet you're going to find a lot of companies working on this already. Or go on Crunchbase or these other sites and look for them because I don't back startups that are late to a party unless they have something that's super awesome
Yeah.
and they're going to like leapfrog everything. And that's a really high bar. So, I'm nothing would make me happier than to prove me wrong, right? Sometimes people get lucky, but I can't justify an investment in someone that's 2 or 3 years behind the market without something super awesome.
Wow. Wow, amazing. So, what role does storytelling when pitching, not just to investor, but to customer and team?
Everything is storytelling, right? I mean, don't get too light and fluffy about that, right?
Yeah.
But everything has to have you know, a good starting point, a good ending point, and a path that gets you from point A to point B. If it doesn't make sense, like it's not coherent. So if you're pitching an investor, there's a lot of advice out there about what goes into a good pitch deck. Some of the advice is kind of bad. A lot of the advice is very good. Of course, the best advice is in the book. That goes without saying. Uh, but depending on the kind of startup you have, the story might be different. So let's say you have a startup and It's a very good why now. You're one of the first people out of the gate with it, which means that you've got a very innovative solution to a problem, but you don't really have that much traction yet. So the story you might tell, you might start with, the problem that you're solving, the solution. Those are really pretty far up.
Yeah.
And then, your traction slide may go pretty far back in the deck, but you might go from problem solution into your total addressable market, right? Here's what I'm solving, and it's huge. And then you might go into the competition and say, and hey, like, there's not a lot of people doing it yet because we're right on the cutting edge and we're ahead of the few people that are. And then you'll say traction, and it's really early yet, but look at what we've done so far. Now, the alternative, let's say you're a company that's already been out there for a bit. There's a lot of people in your space that that do it, but you've actually got good traction. So you might actually, even before you do problem and solution, you might have what I call a sizzle slide. The sizzle slide is a way of grabbing the investor by the collar and saying, dude, here, like I'm not one of 20 companies. I'm actually ahead. Here's why. Look for this. And you put your traction. It's like, hey, I got $2 million in revenue already. Here are 5 logos of really big customers. And by the way, this is my 3rd startup. So, I'm a good team. And like, okay, I was kind of bored before I looked at your deck because I thought you were just a Me Too startup, but now there might be something. So then you do problem and solution, which I kind of get because I've seen it before. So you can move through that pretty fast. And then you go straight to traction. And then maybe straight to competition, right? Hey, and I'm ahead of I'm doing like $2 million in revenue. And by the way, the reason I'm doing that well and the others aren't is because I'm so much better than them in these ways. And then you can get to the market later because the market's probably less important. If there are enough people at it, it's probably a big enough market. But your story in the first situation is this is huge potential and we're, ahead of the pack, but it's early. Your story in the second example is like, I know it looks like a crowded market, but we're the horse that's ahead of the pack. We're the one that off. Right? Same slides, different order, different story.
Oh, amazing. Various way of actually engaging this and getting the most out of it. Thanks for sharing that particular procedure. So, how do you see your startup and VC landscape shifting in the next 5 to 10 years?
Um, there's a French expression, which I'll just say in English because it sounds pretentious when I do it in French. The more things change, the more things stay the same. So, I don't see any massive changes in how VCs and startups interact. There are some very interesting tools. Like AI is really changing venture behind the scenes. And we don't really know exactly where it's going to end up, but I'll tell you how it changes it. So this is, a lot of the guys in listening to your show probably are more on the startup side of the fence. But for a VC, our business really hasn't changed that much in 20 years. It's gotten a lot bigger.
Yeah.
But the way we would do it, like the average VC is out there and they've cultivated their networks. Maybe they're at a fund that has a bit of a reputation. So, they're active on LinkedIn or X or whatever social media they're on. They're trying to get startups to hear about them and come to them. Or they're going out there and depending on the stage they're at, they may be like, I'm a B round investor. It's a company that's, it's been a year since their last round. Or, I'm super early stage, so I'm in constant contact with the different accelerators that I like. Whatever it is that they do, that's how they source startups. They've been doing it that way for 20 years. And then when they look at the pitch deck, they read it, they kind of pull out, most pitch decks sucks, so they kind of pull out the information they think they need from that pitch deck manually. And then if they like it enough, they schedule a call with the founder. And, when they're done with the call, they kind of put all that detail together and they put together a memo, right? A semi-structured memo. Here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the size of the market, all these things along with their comments about, do I believe it? Do I disagree? Is it large enough, small enough? Is it a painful enough problem? And if you really like it, then you want to do due diligence, and you go out there and start researching and testing some of those assumptions. Like, I'm going to call a bunch of potential customers, see what they say, right? That's the way we've been doing it for many, many years. But over the past 2 or 3 years, AI has changed a lot of it. So it's come to the point where, and I'm still personally in the process of making the transition, and I can't trust it to get it wrong. I'll use this as a first pass. I can just drop the deck into an AI tool and ask them to take that, here's how I like to write my memos,
Yeah.
extract that data and throw it in the format I want. So now it's changed that front end. I'm looking at it and like, wow, that's different. I might even go out there and use it to source startups. I might say like, hey, this is what I invest in. Go check out like the new Y Combinator class and see if there's anything there that makes sense for me. Or here's the 20 different places I like to look. It's been 2 weeks. Go ahead and look again. Uh, I could even use it as part of the email. Like, here's the deck. Deck just came in. You looked at the deck. Awesome. Don't show it to me yet. Go back to Aro and say, hey, here's what I got out of your deck. I didn't see your pricing. Like, how exactly do you price? Or I didn't see, market size. Or I saw the market size, but, it's top down BS. How would you do it from a bottoms up calculation? I could use an AI agent to do that. They could be my entire front end.
Yeah.
And then when I decide I want to do it, like competitive research, it's like, hey, here's the deck, here's what they do, here are the 3 or 4 startups they cited on their competition slide. Go out there and look at those and any other startups you think are relevant, and give me a little brief on that. So it's getting to the point where like large chunks of the manual stuff that we have to do can be done by AI. I don't think we're there at the point where we would trust it yet. And there's
Yeah.
no all-in-one tool that's been built. Like we're all playing with ChatGPT and doing this with
Yeah.
in-house tools, but a lot's changing on our end.
Wow. So true. Amazing. Amazing. So what are the red flag when you look for that tells you that startup probably won't make it?
Um, okay. The analogy here is that startups are like a chain, not like a rope. So if you look at a rope and a couple of strands are frayed, you're like, okay, the rope can still hold. When you have a chain, if any one link is broken, the chain's useless.
Mm. Yeah.
So, in a weird sort of way, the answer to that is it's all red flags. Each link has to be secure. Now, depending on the type of startup it is and how far along they are, sometimes I know where to look first, right? Oh, it's a startup that targets architects. Usually that market size is too small. Let's jump to the market size slot. Uh, so, you get a little bit of instincts about it that make you a little bit more efficient as a VC. But the two big kind of meta questions that make a startup fail. Number one, they're not solving something that has a good why now to it. Right? So it's like they're starting something that could have been done 3, 4, 5 years ago. Probably a lot of people are. And when I was a generalist, that was a really important rule of thumb because it might be a sector I don't know about, but if I don't see any reason why they couldn't have done it 5 years ago, my bet is there's tons of people out there. So I would probably not even look at that startup. I would just assume there's other competitors out there. Now that I'm a specialist, I usually know a bunch of the companies that are out there. So if someone comes up to me, I'm like, I don't actually know anyone doing this, then that's usually enough. And if I'm like, I don't know anyone's doing this, but there's no why now, then I'll go out there and look to see whether or not I'm wrong about there being other players out there, or maybe like there is a why now. Maybe it's fresher than I thought. So that's one. And the second one is the team, right? So, you talk to the founder, and that's the biggest unknown at the end of the day. Like you can tell me where you are as a company, you can tell me what your plans are, but until I'm actually working with you, until I'm invested in you, I'm not that I'm not close enough to really know how you react under pressure, how you think. So the biggest hesitation we have going into it is like, who am I getting in bed with? Because things will change, right? The business will change, you'll pivot, a competitor will do something different. And I'm making as big a bet on you being the kind of person that can, kind of ride that out and adjust to
Yeah.
it as I am on what you're doing on your own. So that's, you know, when we get that wrong, that's when startups fail a lot of the time.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, what do you hope reader of Entrepreneur Odyssey uh, walk away with, especially those grinding day to day small business or trade?
Cool. So, the hustle's the same, but there's a big difference
Yeah.
between a small business startup and a tech startup.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to cast shade on either of them. Like, it takes a lot of balls to go out there and, quit your day job and do anything. The main difference, as I see it, is that if you're doing kind of a small business hustle, you know a lot of things, right? Let's say it's a car wash. Well, you know how a car wash works. You know how much water it's going to take, how much soap it's going to take, how much the equipment costs. You can go figure out how much it costs to like rent, that city block, whatever it is, to do it. The one thing you don't know is how much revenue am I going to take in,
Yeah.
right? You'll market, but that's the one unknown. With a tech startup, everything I just mentioned is unknown. No one's done this before. I think I'm going to charge this much. Will the customers pay this much? I don't know until I test it. Right? I think these are going to be the features. Are they going to be the features? Well, hopefully I did my homework
Yeah.
properly, but I'll be surprised. Right? So all those things along the way you don't know. There's just so much more unknown. So, kind of my advice to people is if you're doing it, really, really, really understand what that feels like and if that's the right thing for you before you leave that job. In fact, that's part of the reason I wrote this as a novel, right? The idea to write it as a novel is so you can actually feel how the entrepreneur feels. So you can understand what it feels like when, you've only raised so much money, and if you don't raise more money, the company's over, right? Or you're just trying to find a product market fit. It's not for everybody. And I'm not, no value judgment, right? There's lots of people out there that are very successful within a profession,
Yeah.
uh, but they shouldn't be entrepreneurs. I should not be a lawyer. It's okay. If you're sitting in your office, and it's going to be a better way to do this, and you're trying to decide in your gut, are you the kind of person that can quit that job and take these risks and try to build something new? Like, that's kind of the key issue, right? If you take that leap and you're not that kind of person, you're going to be miserable and you'll fail. If you are that kind of person and you stay in the cubicle, you're going to be miserable. You might succeed, but you're still going to be
Mm.
miserable. So
Yeah.
that's the key
Thank you so
takeaway
much. Thank you so
that
much,
way.
Andrew. Yeah. And finally, Andrew, if there was one message you want entrepreneur, whether in tech, trade, or anywhere in between, to carry on with, what would it be?
Oh, what's my one piece of advice?
Yeah.
Well, that's easy. Buy the book. Oh, no, I'm joking a little bit, but like
Yeah.
it's for real, right? I mean, this is 20 years of startup investing. This is two startups and all the mistakes I made along the way. Right? That's why I wrote it. Like I can talk to how many startups can I talk to in a week before I lose my voice? Right? This is my way of getting all that out broader. And if
Wow.
you are a founder and your mom's on your case, she doesn't know what you're doing, will you go to law school, buy a copy of the book and give it to her? Then you'll know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
not help, but at least they'll give her something to do for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew. So, Andrew, how can my audience learn more about you? How can they get your books, and how
Sure.
can they actually more like do business with you?
Absolutely. So I'll give you the links and you can put them in the show notes at
Yeah,
the end. The
definitely.
easiest way to find out more about me is to either go to my website. It's Andrew, the letter B as in boy, Ackerman.com. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. I kind of look like this. In fact, I may actually be wearing this shirt, my LinkedIn photo. I don't remember. And if you forget that, nothing else, it's the Entrepreneur's Odyssey. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. You can order it there too.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Andrew, thank you for sharing not just the big win, but also the raw lessons that shape real entrepreneurs. Your journey across startup, venture capital, and teaching is a proof that success isn't straight line, but a mix of resilience, reinvention, and wisdom share. For listeners who want to dive deeper, check out Andrew's book, The Entrepreneur Odyssey. Visit his website at andrewbackman.com. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundary. Once again, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.